About how complicated the system is. And I want to take 2 minutes to walk you through the system as it currently exists and give you an example. This is how you calculate what people get. You take the impairment rating times the multiple factor, and that equals the disability percentage. You take the disability percentage times the total value of the injury, as our law sets it, and that gives you the number of weeks of compensation you get. You take the number of weeks of compensation, you times it by the comp rate, which is less than what they make when they're working, and you get PPD. Let's walk through it. Say you have a light guy has a ACL tear, a 35-year-old fireman with an ACL tear. You get 10% impairment rating. You multiply that by 1.5. Now that's the average. If you go back to work in Tennessee, that's the average you get right now is 1.5. His disability then would be 15% to the leg. You run the math through, and this man would receive $12,000 for an ACL tear under our current system. You take the governor's plan for this run-of-the-mill knee case, and what they do is take the impairment rating only times the number of weeks times the comp rate. It takes out that factor that applies for disability. It's an impairment-based system. 4%, and here's the kicker. This is what you haven't heard about. Under this system, you take the 10% impairment to the man's leg, and you make it a 4% impairment to his body. And that ends up in this, with the way they do it now, him getting $7,200, from $12,000 to $7,200. That's a reduction of 40%. And he went back to work. Well, if you don't go back to work, take the same formula. Let's take a 35-year-old policeman who has a neck fusion. You take a 7% impairment rating for a neck fusion. Now, if you don't go back to work, the average multiplier in Tennessee right now is 3.2. The average is 3.2. That's why I use 3.2. That's the average. That equals 22% disability. You run the math through under our little formula here that's not complicated. And this man gets $35,000 for a neck fusion, and he's been fired under our current system. Now, what happens to the governor's system? What happens? If you pass this as it is, you take his impairment rating, 7%, and because he's less than 35, less than 40, all he'll get is 1.35 if he's a policeman because he's got a high school education. That's it. Remember, it's 1.5 if you go back to work. Under this bill, it's 1.35 if you get fired. So it makes it cheaper and easier just to fire employees. Why would you keep them around when it's cheaper now to fire them than it is currently to keep them? So this policeman with a neck fusion would get $17,000, and that's a reduction of 53%. That's what happens to real people, when you pass this bill as it is.